Hi everyone, my name is Terry Westwell and today's Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our book of the week, which is Ask for Andrea by Noelle Ihli. So first, this is a spoiler-free section, so if you haven't read this book yet, don't worry about it, it won't be spoiled for you here. There will be some spoiler-related things that I want to discuss, but that'll be later on in the video and you will get plenty of warning. If you'd like to join in on any of the discussions, send me your thoughts, comments, or even a short video clip of you discussing the book, then I'll list the next upcoming 4 books in the description below. So I rated this one 5 stars, which is a really big deal because while I do really enjoy the occasional thriller, I'm definitely more of a fantasy and romantasy reader. It really takes a lot for a thriller to keep me gripped and glued to each page, and this one absolutely did. In fact, I flew through it. Okay, so quick summary. This book follows 3 women, and pretty much the only thing that they have in common is that they were all murdered by the same man. A man who hides behind his charm, dating apps, and this appearance of being the perfect gentleman. But while these women might be dead, they are far from gone. In fact, after finding one another in death, they are determined to stop him before he kills again. And to be honest, that premise alone was enough to hook me. If I was to compare this to any other book, I think I would have a really hard time with it because I honestly don't feel like I've read many thrillers quite like it. It felt very unique and it was less about the mystery and more about the emotional impact of what happened to these women and their determination to stop it from happening again. One thing that really surprised me was just how invested I became in the story, despite the fact that it was told through multiple perspectives, which, if you have listened to any of my reviews before, then you're probably aware that multiple POVs aren't usually my favourite thing. Sometimes I find it really difficult to connect with the characters when the focus is constantly shifting, but here I felt like it really worked. Each woman had their own distinct personality, experience, and perspective on what happened to them, which made them feel like 3 individual characters rather than just a copy of the same one, which I feel like should be a given, but we all know that that's not always the case with books, and that's why I felt so invested in them. I really liked the characters, well, most of them anyway, because obviously one of them was a serial killer, but the women were incredibly easy to root for. They each had their own voice, struggles, and emotional weight, and I think that that's why the book worked so well for me emotionally. And what really carried this book for me, besides the emotional weight, was the suspense. It's not a book that relies on a big twist to carry it every 50 pages. In fact, I would say that there's not really a twist at all. Strangely enough, I don't feel like it was needed either because the tension comes from knowing exactly who you're dealing with and wanting desperately for these women to stop him before he hurts anyone else. The second half of the book had me especially hooked. I think that the pacing was fantastic and each chapter seemed to build on the previous one, which just helped to build on that emotion and the tension that just made me not want to put the book down. For me, the strongest aspect was just the overall concept. It felt really unique and refreshing. A lot of thrillers obviously focus on catching and finding out who the killer is, whereas this one was more about the victims and them refusing to let their story end there. And that gave it a very different emotional feel to a lot of other thrillers I've read. It's less about any sort of mystery and more about justice and, trying to prevent it from happening to anyone else. The writing was also very accessible and easy to read, which I have mentioned in a lot of reviews before that I do tend to really enjoy. Like, if I was being incredibly picky, then I suppose readers who really rely on big twists and big shock reveals might not find this so surprising, but for me, the suspense and the emotional weight of this book really makes up for that. So as for the question, would I recommend the book? Yes, absolutely. In fact, even if you're not usually a thriller reader, I think that this one is worth picking up. As someone who usually reaches out more towards fantasy and romantasy, I still really loved it. So, will I be reading any more by this author? Without question, this is my first book by this author and it won't be my last. So earlier on in the video, I said that you get plenty of warning for any upcoming spoilers. Now this is that moment, so if you haven't read this book yet, I would suggest going doing that first, because beyond this point, there will absolutely be spoilers. What I loved most about this book was that it never tries to trick the reader. We know who the villain is and we know what he's capable of. The tension comes purely from the question, will he get away with it again? And what will happen to these girls? And honestly, I found that way more effective than if it had just tried to constantly surprise me. I also really loved just how different the three women felt. I think that it could have been very easy for them to blend together, but they all felt very distinct. And I think because of that, it really added emotional weight to their stories. The second half of the book is where it really took off for me because every time it felt like the killer might slip through the cracks again or maybe even hurt his own family, I found myself getting increasingly more and more stressed. I was just really invested in seeing these women finally get justice and be able to move on, and that's what made the ending really work for me. Like, it wasn't about some big twist, it was about the story coming full circle and these characters finally getting the resolution that they deserve. So, overall, Ask for Andrea was gripping, emotional, suspenseful, and incredibly difficult to put down. It was one of the few thrillers I've read recently that has completely gripped me from beginning to end. It felt unique, the characters felt memorable, and I just feel like the suspense was handled brilliantly. For me, it was an easy 5-star read, but if you've read it, let me know what you thought in the comments below. So on the 7th of July, we'll be discussing All That's Left in the World by Erik Brown, so don't forget to get your thoughts and comments in by Sunday, the 5th of July at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or Discord. Following that, we'll be discussing Fairydale, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list the next 4 books down below, along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining, and if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, it's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye! If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video. We can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message.